Today, we continue our talk about blockchain, cryptocurrency, and non-fungible tokens. In our last video, Ivan Imhoff, Vice President Digital Business at Kaspersky, explained what an NFT is. You can check the video in the description. Now, we continue our discussion with Ivan Imhoff and our new guest, Ivan Kwiatkowski, Senior Security Researcher at Kaspersky, about pros and cons of NFT. Hello, colleagues. How are you? So let's talk about NFT. And first of all, tell me, how do you personally connect with NFT? Ivan, what about you?
I think we're going to use the traditional MetaMask and hardware wallets. I use Trezor and I have a Ledger S as well. You know, you always want to keep your cold storage cold.
Okay, Ivan, how about you?
So as for me, I totally went out of the crypto ecosystem probably 5 to 7 years ago. I'm still following what's going on over there. But what I would like to state is that I have currently no positions, either short or long, and I stand to gain no financial interest or anything based on everything I'm going to say. So I'm totally out of it.
Okay.
That is not my case. I can tell you that much. I bought some Bitcoin last night when it dumped at 19.5, and I hope that it keeps on going down. So I am absolutely biased.
And what is NFT for you in 3 words? Just 3 associations. Ivan?
I would say that it's custodialship, responsibility, and separation.
It's a pretty hard question. I would say Buzzword, scam, and probably illusion.
Very interesting. I think we will come back to these associations a little bit later. And now, what drives NFT today? What do you think, Ivan?
So that's a very interesting question in the sense that does something actually drive NFT today? I'm not even sure of that. The whole market has experienced a major crash. It was quite healthy, very much expanding maybe last year. This year, I think that the overall volume of sales has decreased by something like 90%. What used to drive the NFT ecosystem, in my opinion, was the need for the whole crypto ecosystem to provide liquidity. Otherwise, it cannot function. And so, in my opinion, NFTs were created ex nihilo in order to have some sort of product that would be able to be sold using cryptocurrencies. But beyond it, that was everything. So it was really a media-fueled and hype-fueled economic frenzy. And I think this is what used to drive the market, and it had just collapsed because the actual uses of NFTs have not proven to be useful at all.
Ivan, would you like to add something? Or maybe you have another opinion?
I fundamentally disagree, obviously. Simply because we need to do the separation of hype, media, retail investment, technology investments, and future. If you look at any technology path, and not so long ago, if you go back into the history of things like Bitcoin, you could hear people like Janet Yellen saying that Bitcoin is used by drug dealers on the dark market. And now that Fidelity has announced their launch of crypto trading platforms for their 30 plus million customers, you're not going to hear Janet Yellen saying that it's used by cocaine dealers and drug smugglers. So I think we always need to factor in time, right? Time of evolution, time of disruption. We have video clips of Good Morning America saying this email thing will never work. And today we only communicate through email. And I think the NFT cycle is very similar. The investment cycles, the mergers and acquisitions that are happening in the bear market around NFTs are real, but the investments are still real. And actually, if you peruse the media, there are greater investments today in the NFT environment, the metaverse environment, and of course, bigger controversies. There's some articles about Zuckerberg and his metaverse views that are quite funny, but it's just a question of a cycle. So yeah, I agree with the element that the retail hype, the greed, just like the art market is going into a bear market. The NFT is too. There's probably a lot of similarities in terms of the psychologies there. As far as I'm concerned, the development of the NFT environment, the use of NFT in metaverse and in gaming, the developer cycle and push into that environment is actually increasing. So there are signs that that is not exactly accurate in terms of the downswing. The technology itself most certainly has a lot of use cases, but like everything, the internet has taken 20 years to develop, to become what it is today. But let's not forget that retail sales is still bigger than e-commerce sales in most markets. So it takes time, and we need to factor in time.
Okay, you mentioned art as a case of NFT use. And what about digital property? Is it really exist? I mean, do you really own this object for which you have an NFT? Ivan, do you believe in it?
Well, that's the code-based principle. I mean, do we believe in digital assets? I think the question is, what today do you have that is tangible? Very few people today own a tangible lease on their own properties. That is now numerical. The cash that you think that you have in a bank is a reverse entry on the screen that you see. You don't own that bank. And I was in Greece when people weren't allowed to access their cash. So that is virtual. Your identity, and we're a security company, is entirely virtual. And that is partly the existence of Kaspersky as well. Therefore, digital property today, I don't think that there's a single generation under the age of 40 that doesn't accept and understand that digital ownership is ownership. That digital is virtually, in the case, a tangible element. And I know that a lot of industries struggle with that. People that invest in gold, notably, are the people that have the biggest contradiction. They say invest in gold, it's a tangible asset, yet gold investors have never held a gold coin. And I have a few dozen gold coins sitting in a drawer over there. Most people that own gold don't own gold. People that own shares don't own the physical shares. So yes, digital property exists. It is not what we think it is. And if there's anything that gets closer to the responsibilization of ownership, that is cryptocurrency and NFTs. But there are caveats to it. Do you really own it if it's not fundamentally decentralized, which is also the question ultimately below it. And if you had NFTs on the Solana blockchain, might not be the most obvious answer. Okay,
we will speak about decentralization a little bit later. And Ivan, I know that you have an opinion on this question as well.
Correct, I do. So I think to answer the question, we need to distinguish between two things. I genuinely believe that there can be virtual deeds on actual property. Like as Ivan mentioned, you do have contracts that are numerized and digitalized and sent on the cloud, or you receive contracts over email, which are a form of digital deeds on physical objects. When it comes to owning digital objects, then I would tend to disagree, and I do not actually think that it is possible. The reason for this is that you need two conditions to own something. You need the object to be unique, and then you will need an authority to guarantee your ownership rights. What I mean by this is that if you have a video game online, then if you get an object in this video game, it's very easy for you to own it because there is only one of those objects that you get, because there is one of them is in the database of the video game developer, and your character owns it in the game. And so it's very difficult for someone to right click and save this object and use it for them. But when it comes to pictures, when it comes to digital media, like videos, and so on, all these objects get copied infinitely during their daily use. And my copy of the object is going to be exactly the same as your copy of the object. And so saying that one can belong to me is tedious at best. And the second problem that there is that even though I might buy something and have my digital rights stored somewhere on a blockchain, it doesn't really matter that much if there isn't some sort of authority that I actually do own this object. What I mean by this is if I were to buy a house and have this deed inserted somewhere in the Ethereum blockchain or in the Tezos blockchain or whatever, then unless there is a government that says that this blockchain is authoritative for this market, then my ownership doesn't really mean much, because if someone else buys the same house on another blockchain, and remember there are actually over 1,000 of those, then which one of the buyers actually owns the house? This is why you kind of need to have a central authority, and the cryptocurrency ecosystem provides neither the central authority neither the uniqueness of any object. So I do not believe that there is any way for digital ownership to actually be a thing.
So I think I'm going to retort to that. I think that there is a mismatch of thinking models here. I think we hear that there is the reliance on a central authority to be the arbiter of validity. And we are assuming through this dialogue that the arbiter, and therefore the authority, has to be a centralized entity that is tangibly contactable, touchable, a judge, a government representative. And this is the core of the debate around crypto. This is what was actually in the paper of Satoshi Nakamoto, which is that the ownership or the authority is no longer an individual, a company, or corporation. And it's what we call the third revolution. We are currently ending the second revolution, and we are moving into a third revolution where the paradigm shifts. And this is the challenge of why people understand, don't understand, believe, or don't believe, and everybody's right and simultaneously wrong. This is Schrodinger's cat, right? Everybody's simultaneously wrong and right as we shift the paradigms. And this is the challenge, the intellectual challenge, that we absolutely need a centralized traditional authority. An authority is created through consensus, right? When we all agree to give power. And this was written by Machiavelli and the Prince in 1555. If we give consensus, whether it's for value, the dollar, gold, or whatever it is, to a blockchain over an entity, then the authoritative role then shifts to whatever we've decided to put consensus on. And that becomes critical mass. So the whole question is, as critical mass develops, where will that consensus of authority go? And if the consensus of authority moves to the representation of deeds, digital rights, whatever it may be, to a centralized blockchain, then that's where it'll go. And this is the debate, this is the pivot that we're going to be living, have been living for the past 15 years, right? This is and that's why I think the arguments of the central authority, the recognition of where that authority lies is a very good question. But I disagree that it has to lie in a central authority, a game developer server. And actually, when we talk about NFT investments, the multi-billion-dollar investments that have been signed in the past 6 months actually pull the NFT and the creative ownership out of the centralized game server environments to put it on a blockchain. You put it on the wrong blockchain, nobody recognizes it. Of course, you've got your issues. But this is the paradigm shift we're in the middle of. You can sit on the sidelines, or you can be part of it. You can wait for the outcome to not screw your investments, which I think is the direction that Ivan has taken. And I think that it's a very good direction, and most people should probably be doing that. It's not the direction that I take.
Actually, I would really like to ask you a question on this, which is, okay, if you think that there can be ownership without a central authority, then how are we going to resolve conflicts? If I buy an object on one blockchain, if you buy the same object on another one, then how are we going?
But it's not the same object, is it?
Oh, it is. If we say we buy a pizza, if I buy it on one blockchain and you buy it on the other one, there is still one single pizza. How do we resolve that?
It's not the same pizza.
Well, if there is only a single physical object behind it, then we are.
This is where you're confusing, I think, the fact that $1 is exchangeable for $1 and the element of an NFT. An NFT is unique. You might have a similar looking object with a similar or identical code base, but if it is linked to a specific blockchain, then by default, it's slightly different, even marginally different, but it's still different. But I understand what you're saying, and this is a fundamental conflict with NFTs. You could physically port an identical physical, magic sword and put it on Wax, Near, Avalanche, Ethereum, and you can go on. And you're absolutely right. And this is the challenge. But this is where consensus, group consensus comes in. As for conflict, I believe that in the earlier speeches of Vitalik Buterin, one of the things around smart contracts was that, and the huge development around smart contracts is actually automating a lot of legal processes. Now, we're in the early stages, right? The transmissal or selling of a deed can be automated inside of a blockchain, and properties are being moved through blockchains. I live in Dubai. It's happening already here. Is it foolproof? It's not. Absolutely right. Can you handle every discontent moment? No, it hasn't been programmed. Of course it hasn't. Do habits need to change? Absolutely. But when you're looking at the infancy of the evolution of an industry, be it travel and airlines that used to crash all the time and only the rich and the elite could travel in it, to today's world, we're on a journey. But we can't dismiss the necessity and the evolution of that paradigm shift.
Well, not only I dispute this necessity, but also I dispute the fact that it's actually feasible. Like, we are already in a world where there are 1,000 different blockchains, and we are like talking about maybe consensus mechanisms that will allow us to have bigger consensus, not inside blockchain, but among blockchains. I think that this is just never going to happen. It's actually technologically impossible.
Yeah, in that case, you need to call a lot of central banks and say, well, listen, your CDBCs aren't going to work because, hey, I can replicate a lot of this shit from Stellar to another blockchain. You're not going to be able to
CDBCs, they are very centralized. That's why they're going to work.
No, but the code is going to be unique. It's going to be centralized on a single blockchain, isn't it? If we decide that all property records are going to be on one specific blockchain and the consensus is going to be on that one blockchain, just like, I don't know, Bitcoin Cash didn't have relevance because it didn't have consensus. It's the same thing, right? If a population of a country decides to no longer abide by certain laws, what happens? Laws change. Laws don't change because you don't have consensus. And you have examples of this throughout history. Things have shifted. We are in the middle of that shift. Is it going to happen for everything? No. Are we ever going to be completely centrally authority-less? Impossible. Human nature doesn't allow you to have that. But on many things, of course you're going to have it. You're seeing the birth of it already. You had the controversies with Ethereum and Bitcoin. You no longer have them. Same thing.
So you actually believe that eventually there's going to be one blockchain that is authoritative for like digital goods or digital deeds or something like this?
There's going to be many blockchains that are going to be specialized in single purposes. You're seeing it with supply chain management. You've got specialist blockchains that are becoming the authority for that. I don't think there's anything more important sometimes than the ability to track food. And Coca-Cola has already invested in it, and many other food companies have invested in the traceability through blockchain of the authenticity and history of the production and distribution of food items. So depending on the use case, the authority, you can track it with multiple simultaneous blockchains. But when it's going to come to the authority and validation and traceability of those food items in distribution, you're going to have one. Just because you can do things in many different ways doesn't mean that people listen to you.
Okay, so, well, basically you're saying that eventually there's going to be a central authority, but it's going to be a blockchain. So in a way, I think it kind of joins what I was saying, which is that there cannot be ownership without a central authority.
That's not exactly what you said originally, but if you want to say it that way, no problem. I believe I corrected you, but you said that it had to be a traditional entity, a person, a body, a government. And I believe you used the word government, which is democratically elected, or at least in most countries. I said, no, it could be a party or an entity that is not necessarily a human or an administration.
Okay, colleagues, let's continue with our questions, and maybe we will come back to this topic as well. Ivan, you said at the beginning that you believe that NFT is a scam. Please explain your position here.
Okay, so what I mean by this is that I view NFTs as an object that was constructed in order to draw capital into the cryptocurrency ecosystem, which again has liquidity problems. In that sense, they are objects that do not provide a lot of value beyond the happiness of having bought something. Since I do not believe in digital ownership, I do not believe that they provide any actual value. I think a few lawyer agencies have confirmed my opinion on this by saying that having an NFT of an object doesn't give you any rights on an object. And I would say that NFTs are a scam in that sense, in the sense that a lot of people, not all people, of course, and definitely not Ivan here, but a lot of people have purchased NFTs under the idea that it would give them rights on something which was not the case. And a lot of people also bought NFTs believing that they would later be able to sell them at a greater price. So they bought it in for the use of speculation, and they thought they would become rich out of it, which most people didn't. And it was also a scam in that way. Now, I'm not going to dispute that some people have gotten richer with NFTs and that some people actually got something out of this ecosystem just from the single fact of buying something that they liked. But for, I would say, 90% to 95% of the population, getting into the NFT field turned out to be a financial disaster.
Ivan, do you agree with this?
No, I of course don't agree with it, but I guess that's to be expected. Plus, let's remember that I'm French, so by default we disagree with everything. I think that if we look at the definition of a scam, it's the development of something to get somebody to do something that is malicious, right? To cheat. So the first question that we need to ask ourselves is whether or not blockchain and then the derivative of that, or the use case of NFTs, the code level, its base level itself, was created in order to scam people. And the answer is no. If we say that NFTs are a scam, then I think we kindly, very or slightly indirectly offend pretty much the entire collectibles and art market. Everybody that's bought wine as an investment, art as an investment, has been profoundly insulted. So we've got the code level element that says, was this created in order to cheat people? And I think that's the pretty basic dictionary definition that obviously everybody can review. The answer is no. Was the technology created for deception? And the answer was no. It's either an experiment in a garage that went rogue or exploded in terms of adoption and usage. But ultimately, it is very much akin to trading and financials, the collectible. It is akin to ego. And of course, anything that has the element of greed, ego, ends up being exploited. So are NFTs exploited? The answer is absolutely. Are the markets exploited? They are absolutely there. They get cheated both technically, financially, and commercially. NFTs are stolen on a daily basis through code errors, manipulation errors, phishing scams, ID and log scams, you name it. But was it profoundly created for that? No. So therefore, the NFT is not a scam. Human greed, negligence, and intelligence combined make it a perfect target for scams.
Okay, then I would like to offer a counterpoint to this. If the question is, was it creating for cheating people, is the criteria for whether something is a scam, then we can maybe reframe this question another way. Take casinos, for instance. Were casinos created to cheat people out of money? No, they were not, because they are very regulated, which, by the way, the cryptocurrency ecosystem is not, but let's keep that for later. Casinos are not created to cheat people for money, but still the house always has an edge, which results in people always losing money, or on the global statistical level, always losing money when they're playing at the casino. So looking at it like this, yeah, maybe it was not designed in order to cheat people out of their money, just like casinos are not designed to cheat people, because if you do win, they will give you a payout. But in the end, the result is always going to be that when you go there, you will end up being poorer, which to me is an apt definition of a scam anyway.
I think it's interesting. I worked in casinos for 4 years, know their psychology quite well, and actually invested in one back in the late 90s. The cliched sentence of the house always wins assumes that there is a house. And I'm not quite sure that the principles of an NFT, when we're asked if NFTs were created and the code base was created and the approach was created to be a scam, is. And I think the answer is no. If you have a house, you might have a house. It might be a community that creates a specific group and cluster of NFTs. In that case, if that is the house, then you will have the hype, you will have the community management, you'll have the momentum, so that you can, just like any cryptocurrency, or by the way, any asset through history, get dumped on. In that case, you're exploiting human greed and naivete. But today it's an NFT, tomorrow it's going to be stock bonds, and back in the 60s, it was penny stocks, right? And you know how penny stocks work, because we have always seen, all of us have seen the movie Wolf of Wall Street. So again, I don't think that NFTs are necessarily a scam. To have a casino, you need a house. To have a house, it's generally a corporate entity, an individual, a community that's being managed or manipulated. You could say the very same thing with Robinhood and the GameStop hype that was done on Reddit to manipulate stock prices. So the answer is still no. NFTs are not a scam. The people that exploit all these environments and human nature, sure.
But there is a house, though, right? All the early adopters of crypto now hold like tremendous amounts of currency, like digital currency that they cannot really cash out of. And you have people like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, the Winklevoss brothers, all these proletarian heroes that are actually, they do have a very significant edge in this game, and that kind of influence heavily on how the rules are designed in this whole ecosystem, I would say. And to me, the house is this whole community, this whole group of all the people that hold the vast quantities of cryptocurrencies that they are trying to dump on the market because they need to exchange it for dollars so they can cash it out and buy Porsche.
Yeah, I think we're one. If you've ever looked at how the gold market is traded, you've just described the gold market, the silver market. You've described pretty much any asset, including George Soros against the pound back in the 70s. So I think that principle, if you look at, the beauty of blockchain is the ability to understand where the big whale wallets are. And you probably realize that Peter Thiel, who's still in his poor little lawsuits, as well as Elon Musk, probably aren't as powerful in terms of ownership. But maybe Elon and his Twitter followers do have the capacity to sway a market. But still then, you're not describing anything different that's been happening for the past centuries of people who have an edge. When BlackRock decides to tank a market because it has $12 trillion in assets under management to make their rich customers richer, they'll do that. Even, I believe, on CNBC, Kramer was caught in his earlier interviews admitting that they would manipulate the press in order to be able to short their stocks. So again, this is nothing new. The technology, the principles, and the volumes of markets being dumped on is always a question of market management. I mean, you sell when everybody wants to buy. You don't sell when everybody's selling. I don't see how this relates particularly more or less to whether an NFT is a scam or not.
Well, it relates in two ways. The first one is you, I think, agree that it was a scam in the real world, and so it's also a scam in the digital world. And the second thing is every time that you say to me, oh, but look, this is a problem that we already had in the past, and this has not been made worse by the digital ecosystem, what I hear actually is, look, this is another problem that cryptocurrencies and blockchains have not solved. And so my question there would be then, what are they exactly solving beyond the problems that they introduced themselves by forcing decentralization on systems that didn't really need them in the first place? Sure.
I think, we're probably extending away from NFTs, but I think it's a very, very powerful question. What do they resolve? The one thing that they resolve outside of the sensationalist media and scams, as we call them, but they're not necessary, is the ability to access. Right? A lot of investments throughout the world you cannot access. A lot of people that are unbanked cannot access. A lot of people that don't have enough funds cannot access because it is centrally owned and governed. And if you've ever tried to invest in some of the most profitable markets, unless you hold $1 million of equity, you cannot access. The second thing, other than access, is you cannot own. A lot of people around the world, and if we stop thinking with our sort of modern specialist minds, and you look at the people around the world, you cannot transmit. You cannot own. You are completely governed. And I've had very close challenges with paying medical bills in Venezuela for somebody that was in my family. And when you've lived in Venezuela like I have, and you have family in Venezuela like I have, try to transfer money. Try to send money to pay for heart surgery. If it wasn't for crypto, the ability to transmit, the ability to own, and the ability to trust less without a central authority would have been impossible. And I would have lost a dear family member. So what does it solve? It solves a lot. Does it solve human greed? The ability to get exploited by others? It does not. Not yet. But it does solve a lot of challenges. And again, If you ask the question to the Good Morning America crew, who said that emails are destructive to the human mind, that they take too much energy and overload us with messages, if we had listened to that, where would we be today?
Okay, so what you're saying is basically that it allows everyone in the world to gain access to investment platforms and so on. So this ties in again to the scam discussion, which what I understand there is the crypto ecosystem has allowed lay people to have Wall Street in their homes, to be able to do like stock trading and money exchange and all those kinds of financial operations that are tied to speculation. I would dispute that it's actually a good thing. I don't think that most people actually need to be doing speculation, even though now it's possible for them. As for money transfers, I'm not going to dispute the fact that it was useful to you or to other people a few times. I'm pretty sure that we really did not need such complicated solutions and inefficient solutions as the blockchain in order to achieve that. And I'm pretty sure that there were way better technological avenues to perform those simple tasks.
Yeah, I think you're wrong. And I'm not going to cut it short too much. You're fundamentally wrong. I think you're summarizing this on an element of speculation, turning cash into assets that you can actually do international payments in Nigeria, where we had an office for 7 years in my previous life. You understand that giving people to access doesn't necessarily mean Wall Street speculation. The remittance market from the United States to Latin America, again, a market that I'm very familiar with, is in the tens of billions of dollars, where centralized corporations will scam as much as 2 months worth of work in order to be able to transmit money from North America to their families in Peru, Ecuador, Chile, or wherever. So I think summarizing ownership, responsibility, and independence as giving access to speculation of Wall Street would displease my friends in Lebanon who saw their 70% local currencies devalued, and if they hadn't bought a little bit of Bitcoin on the side, probably would have not been able to, save a lot of money. So I think the quantities and the ratios that you use are not exactly very reflective of the use cases and the potentiality that it carries.
Well, if they lost 70% of their value of their local currency in Lebanon, I hope they hadn't bought too much Bitcoin, because I think on occasion it has lost 40% as well. So I wouldn't call it a good refuge. But I mean, even beyond this, I mean, I've been in the IT world for over 10 years now, and I've known so many people that have invested in Bitcoin and Ethereum at various points in their lives. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that none of them had ever bought those in order to do something else as either buy drugs or speculate. These are the only two uses that I've ever seen in all my life for cryptocurrencies. I'm not saying that they are fundamentally bad. I'm saying that this has nothing to do with access or with money transfers or with actually paying for goods. It was always speculation with every single use I've ever seen in my life. And I've seen lots of them.
Yeah, and I think, everybody's entitled to live in their lens and in their views and in their worlds. That is the view that you take through the lens and the ecosystem that you've lived in and experienced. Everybody's got a different one. Governments have a different one. Rich people, poor people, the unbanked, etc. And yeah, that's your view. Just understand that maybe it's not a majority view, nor is it the only view.
And what about these people who actually become victims of scam for some reason, because of their fullness or because of the circumstances, whatever? Is there any chance to have arbitrary for this sphere, or have any kind of compensation, or be protected by some authority?
Sure, I would say sometimes yes. That's the very funny thing about cryptocurrency. Most of the time, for you and me, if we get scammed by some hacking attempt, or if we click on the wrong link or commit some security mistake and get all our funds hacked away, then we are not going to get them back. It turns out that if you are extremely rich and a big person important in this ecosystem, there might be a way for you to recover your funds. The example I'm going to take here is taken from the early days of Ethereum. It was an experiment called the DAO. And it was a decentralized organization that was created where people would pool their money together in order to invest in projects as a group. And it turned out that the smart contract back then was flawed, and there was a vulnerability inside of it, and someone was able to siphon lots of funds from that fund. I think from memory, this was something like the hacker was able to take about 5% of all Ethereum that existed back then. And, some people might have said, code is law, or contracts are contracts, and so on, and, that's the way it is. But actually what happened was there was a hard fork of the whole blockchain that was operated by, the creators of Ethereum, by the major players, that created a sort of parallel reality where all the funds had never been hacked. So what I would say is that if you are one of the elites of this ecosystem, you might have enough pull to recreate another world where nothing bad happened to you. So it's safe for the richest people, just like in the real world. But if you are just a normal person like you and me, if you get hacked, then there are virtually zero guarantees and zero ways of recourse that are going to allow you to gain your money back.
Ivan, do you have something to add?
You know it. Of course I do. I think that putting this against the rich against the poor is not a very good argument. I think that when you look at it at a code level basis, the whole element is about responsibility, which is also the threat that scares a lot of people from entering this environment. You get phished, you send crypto through the wrong blockchain or the wrong blockchain variants, and you lose it and you're done. Now, when it comes, the question was around NFT scams. Now, we understand that it's not based on the code itself, because the code itself is not a scam. Therefore, have there been scams around NFTs in crypto? And there's many categories of it. Depending on the category, there are recourses. In the base illustration of the split of chains, it's not necessarily the rich or powerful. It was the early days, and so they had the means. Would you be able to do that today? You're absolutely right. And if it wasn't a lot of money, and if there weren't personal interests invested in this, of course you wouldn't do it. So I think it's a very valid argument. But that being said, there's the development of insurance on the blockchain to mitigate against the blockchain, the actual smart contract coding errors. It's an industry that's developing. I've actually benefited from it once, unfortunately not on a very large amount, but I do know that it works. Then there's the reputational side. So if we go back to the question, which is an NFT scam, and there were a few recent ones on OpenSea, the very big trading platform. There was actually a flaw in not the blockchain, but there was actually a flaw within the site's, the OpenSea's site code. And somebody was stolen a very valuable NFT. I don't know if it was a Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT. In that case, you can create a reputational risk. And a lot of Kaspersky right now and a lot of companies that we work with are worried about reputational risk. So the reputational risk factor can be something that pushes to remediate. In the case of a lot of DAOs, most of which are not centralized despite what they may say, there are mechanisms to mitigate against these flaws, to pay back, support the investors inside of that blockchain. Aave and their protocol have that. That being said, and in the recent example, and I have a little bit of money tied into a protocol called Harmony 1, their bridge got hacked and it got wiped out. The bridge between the Ethereum and the Harmony. And I got $4,000 stuck into that. The DAO's not kicking in. The remediation plans aren't working, and there is no consensus around its remediation. So in many circumstances, the systems are being developed to try to remediate such scams. Some are going to be the old school, old world methodologies of doing it, a lawyer. At code level, most of the times you're pretty much going to get stitched. But that is why the world of having both the centralized authority and the autonomous ownership will have to learn to coincide, because there's always going to be, in the near future at the very least, the need for people to refer to a centralized authority for support. Blockchain, unfortunately, it's true, will not, in most cases, allow you to do that. But The insurance policies and the systems for that are in place. They work. They're not foolproof. But again, we have to factor in time and evolution.
So one interesting thing that's also to add with NFT scams is the fact that when they are resolved, usually it's through central authorities. You mentioned OpenSea. Well, when there is a Bored Ape that is stolen, then usually it gets reported to OpenSea, which is the global market for NFTs, basically. And then OpenSea marks it as stolen and prevents all trading related to it. So I think it illustrates pretty well that there is actually a problem with real decentralization in the blockchain ecosystem, which is, I think it's not really decentralized, especially when it comes to NFTs, which are handled by a few platforms and even fewer API providers to the blockchain. And overall, those scams are rampant. There are many of them. And solving them without a central authority is not really something that can happen. It may happen in the future, but I think it will open another set of problems, which is if you have smart contracts and they are immutable, then if there is a bug inside of them, then you're lost forever, right? This program is on the blockchain and then you never need to patch it. But on the other end, if you provide contingency measures that allow you to patch a smart contract on the blockchain, then it's not really a contract anymore because the developer will be able to update it and change the terms after people have purchased them. So really, to me, it's like a catch-22 situation that even in the future, you're not really going to be able to solve anyway.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. And again, that's transition, that's paradigm shifting. When we were still riding horses, the concept of driving a car through the desert was something that we had a challenge. And we all know the saying, why would you buy a car when I already have a horse that just takes water and food? And today I haven't ridden a horse in 35 years. But I think that the challenge, you mentioned immutable and changeable, and the need for that central authority. I think if you look at a lot of countries, that central authority is the crook, right? So what do you do against the crook? That is the actual authority.
Well, apparently the solution is to find a new set of crooks that are like the digital owners and the creators of cryptocurrencies and give them power instead, which I don't think solves anything.
Yeah, I'm not sure that that's how I would describe it, but if you want to put it that way, your faith in politics and the ethical side of your politicians astonishes me ever so slightly. But yeah, I don't fundamentally agree with some of those statements.
Actually, we have the last part of our questions about business. A lot of companies already in this sphere. Why businesses do it? Why businesses come to NFT, make NFTs and hype on it?
I think, again, it always comes to division, right? Division of the environments and the areas. Businesses come to NFTs because it might be closer to their business in terms of its potentiality, right? People will invest in technologies, user experiences, and different models in order to discover and advance towards what the next generation or the next experience or the next paradigm will be. So if you're more into the gaming environment, you can be the gaming companies that have stated that they will never allow NFTs, and some publishers have stated that, or they stated that a year ago and changed their minds fairly recently. And there's some industries where the use of an NFT might not be really part of their core business from a technological perspective. From a commercial perspective and a comms perspective, anything that raises an eyeball, gets a click, and gets visibility is generally something that people are going to gravitate to. I mean, you could debate what is McDonald's playing around with in NFTs and metaverses, other than to get that brand awareness and that name out there and to get the hype. So I think the question is, should people be investing in NFT / and of course you can't walk away from the blockchain environment. And the question and the answer to that is, it depends on your business segment, your specialty, and where you think the world is going to go. And as we all know, investments, 60% of them fail, 40% sort of go, and there's going to be the 1% that makes you $1 trillion. But you got to look at it from a technology, business, and customer experience, a set of beliefs. And you need to have that set of beliefs, and you make your choices from it. And then you got to ride the hype. I mean, if you're going to get some free eyeballs, it's a very competitive environment. Those eyeballs and those clicks are hard to get. And therefore, sometimes we are going to leverage the hell out of it because it is the amplification of our communication strategies. It is the amplification of our brand awareness. And hopefully we do that, decently correct.
So the question was, why are so many companies jumping into this ecosystem, right? And I think funnily, the answer to this question can be found in the structure of our very discussion right now. Now, I've been raising a lot of my personal concerns about NFTs and the cryptocurrency ecosystem and how blockchains operate. And a lot of times, Ivan has replied that the technology is still growing. It's not mature yet, and there are many improvements to be made. And eventually, there will be a paradigm shift taking place. And you kept referring to this example of people 20 years ago saying that email would never be a thing, or that the internet was the e-commerce was totally useless because you could actually go to a store and buy your products that way and was way more convenient. And this ties to fear of missing out. I would argue that, for every thing like technology like email that actually took off and saw a huge success and became an important part of our lives, there has been dozens of, if not hundreds of technologies that were hyped as the next big thing and actually miserably failed. It's entirely possible that blockchains, NFTs, metaverses, and so on are actually also going to fail. But beyond this, there is a big fear of missing out that is being created and generated in the field, and that is a strong incentive for people to jump in. The cryptocurrency ecosystem is famous for favoring the people that go in early, and in that sense, there is a big incentive for companies and individuals to try it and maybe invest in it for the chance that it might someday become extremely successful. And I think it's a big reason why many people get into that field. It's because they think that eventually it's going to work.
Yeah, I think a lot of things, you might be too young to remember or to have invested during the internet bubble back in the late 90s and then 2000, 2001. I unfortunately don't have the privilege of saying that I was too young. I was a little bit too old, and still am now, but, And the psychological patterns are exactly the same. Exactly the same. The messages are similar. You don't have the same scale because obviously your communication channels, development of social propagation weren't as effective in the late 90s and early 2000s as they are today. But what you're describing is nothing different than what an early adopter or an adoption curve is. Your FOMO hasn't kicked in yet. Right now we are in the pioneering early adoption stage. FOMO is nowhere near. FOMO starts kicking in a little bit more upwards inside of your S-curve, right? Where you have the point of acceleration. We could say that we were entering this with the last bull market. But unfortunately, some of the models weren't correct and we didn't hit the 100 grand for that BTC value. If you look at the hype and the investment, and that's when I got into digital, at the point of bubble. I was part of some of those VC conversations in investing in companies such as Pet.com. And if you look at that history, the people, both individuals, companies, and institutions that invested in it, lost their shirts on it. I don't think that we're in any place different. It's just understanding where we are in the adoption curve. The adoption curve is a hell of a lot faster than it was with a lot of technologies. And I think it's a very valid question to ask, do we have critical mass to sustain it? And that's what you ask. Is this going to be the next Philips Laserdisc? I think you're absolutely right. I think when you look at the adoption curve, the institutionalization, who the players are, the money, you don't look at this like a Philips Laserdisc. When BlackRock and its $10 trillion, $12 trillion of assets under management, or Fidelity, are now pouring in not 1 million, not 10 million, but in the hundreds of millions of dollars into this. So I think it determines whether, from an institutional perspective versus a retail, a paradigm shift in society and authority, where we sit. And I think it's hard to figure out. And I think your questions really highlight, do we know where we sit in that? And the answer is, me personally, I have an idea where I think we are, but I'm probably wrong.
Okay, I think we're done for today. Thank you so much for discussion, and see you next time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks.